Greetings, my friends. It is I, Dr. Jimmy again, lurking in the dark on this bright and shiny Saturday morning. Is it still morning? Yes, 1 minute left, almost noon. Yes, here I am. Today's t-shirt, for those who are interested in such silliness, is a Jaws t-shirt. Yes, Amity Island welcomes you. But if you look closely, da-da-da, and here's the little logo, Jaws. So, nice shirt there. And Jaws, of course, was a lovely summer adventure on the 4th of July, which we were able to celebrate year-round at Universal Studios for so many years until that darned wizard showed up. Oh well. You can still ride Jaws in Japan if you can get out there. Oh yes. Now, I would like to have told you this morning that I'm making... Hello, Lenny. There's Lenny. See the cat? There she is. Funny girl. Nice Lenny. I would like to have told you that this would be my 12th video in my series on the history of the event Halloween Horror Nights 25, which I still need to finish up so I can go ahead and do the videos for 26 and 27 before 28 happens. If I can, and I still hope that maybe I'll get that all done this lovely summer as we make it through the summer months leading up to the remaining only 97 days now, under 14 weeks now, a little more than, I think it's like 3 months and 5 days, to the wonderful date of September 14th when Halloween Horror Nights 28 will be upon us at last. But I can't do that history video right now. No, I'll have to wait till later. I don't know how much later. I hope it's not too far. Maybe later this afternoon. Shouldn't promise that. Shouldn't promise anything. But I'd like to get it done this weekend if I could. Can't promise you though. But this video is about Halloween Horror Nights 28 because, oh boy, we had a wonderful update this week. Wonderful, big, exciting news. Because day before yesterday, this is Saturday the 9th while I'm speaking. That's, oh, by the way, you know what today is? June 9th. That's 9. 6-9. That forms a 6 and a 9. Looks like 69, dude. It is, of course, Bill and Ted Day. If only Bill and Ted were still around to enjoy Horror Nights with us. I saw Ted Theodore Logan in Paris on YouTube the other day. Or a little video that Jason was at the Louvre. I guess he's looking for Napoleon. But, you know, Napoleon's at a water park in San Dimas. Anyway, enough of that silliness. 7th of June, that was Thursday, day before yesterday. Excitement all around the Horror Nights fan community, and if you're watching this, you probably heard something about it. The website updated in a magnificent way. The website for Halloween Horror Nights 28. In the morning, it went down, and it was redirected to the regular Universal site for a bit. We knew something was up, and sure enough, bang! It came up again, and this time, you saw little telly, not our big widescreen, high definition, you know, really thin television sets that are like only this thin. Big things that we use now. We can see 3D and digital, all kinds of stuff streaming from everywhere. No, this was an old-fashioned telly, like in my youth. One of those little square screens, boxes, you know, with a big tube that hangs out the back. The old Imi Orthicon tube, old-fashioned television set. Little antennas on it. Rabbit ears, we used to call them, and even the screen looks a little cracked. It's like a different era, say 30 years ago, in the 1980s, that time of when we had a conservative television personality as the president, and we had problems with Russia. And wait a minute, isn't that today? Yeah, everything out is new again, I guess. And sure enough, here we are, back in the 80s. Yes, the great old 80s, the time when I was finishing high school and going to university in my youth. Therefore, people of my age, it's a time of great nostalgia, and the tunes, the music, the pop culture of the 80s are very important to us. You know, we think that's like our stuff. It's like kids today, when you get to be my age, you'll think back to nowadays with nostalgia, which kind of freaks me out. Why would anyone think of this decade nostalgically? But you might when you're 50. If you're a young person today, you might look back, oh man, back in the 2010s, that was the time. So that's what it's like. And apparently, next to the television set is an old-fashioned device you might not recognize if you're very young. It's called a VCR, a video cassette recorder. It also plays the video cassettes. It would actually record stuff off your telly so you could watch it later on a big box-like tape. And sometimes the thing got caught and the tape would come out and oh, you'd wreck it. Oh dear. And it was, you know, square screen, and there was stuff called tracking to get it, you know, your screen might be a bit fuzzy and you'd have to adjust the tracking controls and all sorts of fun back in the day. And you could get tapes from shops that rented them to you, like Blockbuster. There's only 4 Blockbusters left now, and I think they're in Alaska. I saw that on John Oliver the other night. Amazing, they still have them. And of course, originally there were 2 different types of tapes, Betamax and VHS, and then VHS won, and so Beta went away, and we were watching this, and eventually they started selling the videos for cheaper and cheaper prices. Then you could collect your whole collection of VHS tapes. Then in the 90s, something called DVD showed up around the late 90s, and that people replaced their whole VHS collection with DVDs, and then later Blu-ray. And now people are getting rid of all their old home video because you can stream all kinds of stuff on Netflix or Vudu or Hulu or whatever. And people don't even, or just get streaming files and don't even have any of these artifacts, except for old people like myself who still like CDs, and some people still like LPs, you know, cassette tapes, 8-tracks. But back in the 80s, it was the time, and we hadn't really started CDs yet. We were listening to little cassette tapes or 8-track tapes, the bigger ones, or even some vinyl. We were still using that, and we had the home video. And a lot of these, of course, the pictures were pan and scan. You know, all this letterbox stuff didn't really get popular till later. And we didn't have the widescreen televisions or any of that. A different era, and yet a golden age of horror home entertainment. And people began renting all what used to be old drive-in cinemas. The B-schlock movies and drive-in cinemas started getting released straight to home video, and that became the source of all kinds of crazy horror films. The ones you saw in the movies, of course, all the slasher movies and horror movies of the 80s were so great, but you got all kinds of cheap ones that would only get on VHS, maybe wouldn't play in a cinema near your house. So you go down and rent them and watch all these crazy movies. Lots of fun. In Britain, they were called video nasties, and the government banned like 72 or something titles that were just too awful to be seen, and that meant that everybody had to find a copy and watch them if they could, getting them on bootleg or illegal copies. Oh, we're going to watch video nasties. Ooh. And they were never quite as nasty as the government said they were, but of course, the sweet taste of forbidden fruit is wonderful. So it was a wonderful time of horror. And of course, that's when pop music started to get rather interesting. We had MTV and the British invasion, the second British invasion, bands like Duran Duran and the Human League, all of that post-punk stuff. David Bowie had some marvelous videos. Michael Jackson did Thriller. Prince rose to power at that time. All kinds of incredible music was going on. And heavy metal, lots of wonderful bands. And then those glam bands like Poison and Twisted Sister and what was the one with the pentacle? Motley Crue. All of these glamorous hair bands were out at that time period. And then, of course, another example of post-punk music, we had the goth music of Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and many others. What was the Joy Division, and can't even begin to remember all of it right now off the top of my head, but wonderful stuff, glorious music. Some of the stuff was shown late at night on MTV, a 120-minute show. That was marvelous. And then they had the Headbangers Ball for the metalheads. All kinds of, and rap music started to become really popular across the spectrum with early rap. I remember from the 70s like Grandmaster Flash and Sugar Hill Mob, but then later on there was, of course, Run DMC and the Beastie Boys, and that made rap more popular for all sorts of audiences, and it was quite an amazing time, the 80s, in pop culture all the way around. And all of that seems to be symbolized by the telly and the VCR, and there are little video cassette tapes, the old-fashioned ones, and one of them says Stranger Things, one of them says Trick or Treat, and one just says Halloween Horror Nights. So we imagine that as more haunted houses get announced, we'll see more VHS tapes lying around this telly on this site, and maybe we can click on new stuff. Maybe they'll even do clues and hints. I hope so. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be much clickable, but on the screen itself are 3 little films repeating. One has some stuff from Stranger Things, one has some stuff from Trick or Treat. There's nothing on the screen about Dead Exposure, Patient Zero for some reason, but the third bit is about the event itself, and it included a very startling message. More houses than ever before. More houses ever before? How can that be? We were already told on the website previously that there were going to be 9 haunted houses. In fact, when Trick or Treat was announced, it said there'll be 6 more houses to be revealed. But sure enough, when we look further, it said a 10th house has been added to the lineup. Details to come later. So we now know that there will actually be 10 haunted houses. 10 haunted houses at Halloween Horror Nights 28. The most haunted houses of any previous Horror Nights event, I think anywhere. So now we've gone up to 10 houses. Now we only have 9 house locations from the permits, which are pretty much similar to last year, except the 4 sound stages, Soundstage 24A and B and Soundstage 22. The other one is Soundstage 25, being used for the very first time since that big Walking Dead house end of the line back in 2014. So Soundstage 25 is being used probably for a mega house, an Uber house. Stranger Things, maybe? We don't know where that is, actually. We don't know. We only know the location of one of the haunted houses. We know that Trick or Treat will be in the Parade building because Michael told us. But the other 2 houses that have been announced, we don't know where they are. But we do know those 4 sound stages. The Shrek secondary theatre will be used again. The Parade building, building 79. The 2 sprung tents. And the temporary Clearview tent that is being set up. It's already been set up, mind you, near the Men in Black extended queue area. So the same basically 9 locations from last year, But now there's a 10th house. There has to be another location for another house, and no permit for that has been seen yet. Obviously, they're being crafty to keep that from being put out there into the public view until they were able to tell us there were 10 houses. But where? Another soundstage? Possibly. Could they use, perhaps, could they put 2 houses in the parade building? Then again, they're also building another parade building. Well, hasn't that actually been built? Might they use that structure? Will they stick another tent somewhere else? We'll have to wait and see. But there's at least one additional house coming up in another location. And so there'll be 10 houses, some of which will be IP houses, like 2 that have been announced, and some of which will be original houses. Now, when I do this, I'm not necessarily saying 5 IPs and 5 original houses, because I don't know. But wouldn't that be nice? Actually, I'd really like to see more originals, but 5 and 5 might be a good balance now that they have an even number of houses again. We'll see. So that's exciting. But there's more! More that was announced yesterday, because if you looked further for more details about the event, you found out that they had actually announced 3 scare zones. Yes, now there's going to be 5 scare zones. They said that, and they reiterated 5 scare zones in total, but they gave us information about 3 of them. So this is very early release of scare zones, especially original scare zones. Previously, the only time they announced scare zones early in Orlando were when they had IP-driven scare zones. Like in 2014, they had the Purge and Face Off. They announced those earlier in the summer. But now they've announced 3 scare zones already, plus 3 haunted houses. So we've got 3 of the scare zones, 3 of the haunted houses. There's 7 haunted houses left to hear about, and 2 more scare zones. But what are the new scare zones? Well, one is called the Harvest, and it shows a little logo in the artwork. And the Harvest apparently is set in a barn. And you go in this old barn, like an abandoned farm barn, and there's like weird artifacts and creepy and dark and dusty and I suppose farming equipment, stuff you'd find in a barn. But the barn is haunted, and there's some sort of creatures who are involved in some sort of harvest of humans, a reaping. Where have we heard that word before? Reap. Oh yeah, last year. Scarecrow, the reaping. I don't know if that's what this means, but it would seem the way it's written. If you compare the zone description on the website and go look at it, if you compare that description to the wording of the description for the house scarecrow, the reaping last year, there's some distinct similarities. This may very well be a sequel to that house, or some connection, or some extension of that mythology. We might very well see these sort of scarecrow-like creatures again in this zone. And the fact that they talk about a barn implies a structure. Where could that be? I don't know. They don't say where this zone is located. It might be right there as you go up the middle of Production Central and Plaza of the Stars between Shrek and Despicable Me. They might set up like a roof above there, and so you're like in a barn, sort of. Or they might do that somewhere, or they might actually build the barn. If they do that, though, if they actually build a barn, the place that seems most likely for a building you could actually go in would be, you know, the dead center of the park where the schoolhouse was once upon a time, where a different barn was in 2013, where a certain voodoo shack had been set up for a certain ritual in 2014, but for the past couple of years has been a stage for another show. But you know, a show might move to a different venue. I'm not saying that I know anything about that, because I don't. But if they do move a show from that center area into another venue, which is now open because the show that used to be there isn't there anymore, very possible, then that space could become once again the site of an elaborate scare zone with a big structure, and that might be where the harvest is located. Maybe right there at the top of Hollywood Boulevard between Central Park and Battery Park, between Cafe La Bamba and Mills Drive-In. I don't know. It's just a guess. But that would be, I think, a good place to put an actual barn as part of a big scare zone that would extend otherwise. But one place it won't be extending would be into Central Park, because I know what's there now. That's the one of the 3 scare zones. Only one of the 3 scare zones has been given a location. The other 2 we still don't know. The second scare zone, though, is called Vamp 85. Happy New Year! And yeah, that created a huge explosion of happiness, because Vamp 55, the scare zone on Hollywood Boulevard back 2 years ago, was such a fan favorite. And many people were very excited. And lovely Shelby Denham immediately came out with a t-shirt. She'd already made the design, hoping for the rumors that had been floating about possibly vampires in 85 were true. Turns out it was absolutely true. That rumor was true. Vamp 85 is happening. And it will be at a New Year's Eve party, which will be invaded by vampires, just like 30 years before, in 1955, a homecoming celebration was invaded by vampires. But these will be 80s vampires, and they describe punks and big hair vampires. I imagine if it's like the previous zone, they'll use some of that 80s music I talked about earlier in the video. Like Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus is almost a must, and will possibly evoke some of the wonderful vampire movies of that time. I don't know if they're going to do this, but if I were doing it, I would throw in at least some references to films like The Lost Boys and Near Dark, or The Hunger, or Fright Night, and I would make some of the vampire characters resemble some of the characters, like, you know, Catherine Deneuve and David Bowie from The Hunger, or Bill Paxton in Near Dark, or Evil Ed from Fright Night, and especially our Lost Boys, Bill S. Preston Vampire. I don't know if they plan to do that, but they will definitely have 80s punks and 80s rockers and big hair metal, I'm assuming, and other 80s type music characters. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't hear the music of Michael Jackson. Thriller, of course, was a huge hit throughout the entire 1980s. How could you do an 80s themed zone without it? But it's not just the zone that's 80s themed. I forgot to mention the whole damn event apparently is now themed to the 1980s, even though Trick or Treat doesn't take place in the 80s. Both Stranger Things and Patient Zero do. And apparently these scare zones are 80s themed, and maybe many of the remaining haunted houses, originals and IPs, might also be set in that decade. The me decade. So that would be quite fun. So Vamp 85, again, they did not give the actual street location. Vamp 55 was in Hollywood Boulevard. But the New Year's Eve party thing, and talking about the ball dropping, makes me strongly suspect the New York Street area of the park, where they have the big New York New Year's Eve celebrations in Central Park, but Times Square. So I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't have like a big apple or big ball dropping somewhere in New York to celebrate New Year's Eve, and then the vampires for Vamp 85. I imagine New York would be a good place to put the zone, but I don't know that. It's just my guess. I do know where the third zone is going because they told us, and that's the third zone called Twisted Tradition, and that's going in Central Park. So if they do have something in the middle of the park, it's not going to extend into Central Park, but it might be connected because this one's theme does sort of fit in with the harvest. They both have a lot of pumpkins in the artwork. Twisted tradition, we are told, an ancient evil has awoken, whatever that is, and rotting pumpkins are fused with decayed human flesh. That's basically all they said. What does that mean? My guess is some sort of hideous pumpkin human melted together monsters that will be haunting the forest in Central Park. There'll probably be lots of creepy jack-o'-lanterns there again this year. Creepy stuff. They always like to do something woodsy in the Central Park area, and it would complement, if the harvest is where I think it might be, it would complement it. It would almost be like one big zone with or two zones with similar complementary themes in that regard. So it wouldn't be out of place, and it wouldn't be jarring to go from one to the other. So I suspect that is where harvest will be, but I don't know that yet. It's just guessing on my part. But we do know Twisted Tradition is in Central Park. 2 more zones. There have been all kinds of rumors about that. I've heard at least 3 different rumors about the 2 other zones, so obviously not all of them can be true. So don't believe everything you hear, because it's not actually possible. Rumors are always flying around, and you never know how many of them are actually accurate. There's been a big rumor about a haunted house that I think may not be true at all, but I'm not going to say anything more. We'll have to wait and see until they're revealed. But that's not all that was revealed. In addition to, now we've had 3 houses that were announced previously, but we announced, and we know there's going to be a 10th one now, and they announced the 3 zones. They also announced 1 of the shows, and that was really no big surprise. Academy of Villains was such a hit the past 2 years, it's almost a given it's coming back this year, and it is. Academy of Villains will return for a 3rd year with an entirely new show that they've created for Halloween Horror Nights 28. Now, it didn't say where the show is going to be, and if they did do that scare zone in the middle of the park like I think they might have to move Academy somewhere else. That's okay, because the Fear Factor Auditorium is not having Bill and Ted this year. Now, it's a very good possibility. I don't know yet, but it could be that they're putting Academy of Villains there. And that would be really a good thing, because then you'd have a much bigger venue, and you could have stage effects and do all kinds of wonderful stuff on the stage itself, a permanent stage, and do a spectacular show. The downside, of course, is that previous shows, the guests got to stand right up by the stage almost. You can't quite do that in that auditorium. You have to sit down. So that might be, I don't think they're going to let people rush up to it. You know, Academy of Villains kind of likes people getting close. I don't know if they would allow people to stand between the seats and the stage or not. I don't know if they'll allow their hardcore, because there's some hardcore AOV fans that were there the past 2 years that would like camp out in front of the stages and just do that show all night and not even bother with the rest of the event practically. It's like crazy people. But, you know, there are fanatics. So I don't know if that's possible, but if they do it in the Fear Factor Auditorium, they could have all kinds of special lights and explosion stuff that they couldn't do in the outdoor stage, and also it wouldn't have the problems that we had last year with Hurricane Irma, because it's a permanent building that would be secure and wouldn't be like the temporary stage that had to be taken down and then couldn't be put back up after the hurricane and blew the damn show last year. I mean, it was a good show last year, the little one they started with, and then the more expanded show that they ended with, but neither was the full Afterlife show that they created for the event last year, which we'll now apparently never get to see, because Irma killed it. You weather! So maybe this year, even if we do have a storm, if we put the villains in the Fear Factor Auditorium, that could keep the show the way it was meant to be seen, regardless of the weather. That would be lovely. Yes, it would be. Also, it would mean that even if it rained one night, you could still see the show in the auditorium under the roof. They wouldn't have to cancel any shows for bad weather at all. So there's some pros and cons. But again, I don't know if they're actually doing that. I'd like to see them put Academy of Villains in that venue, but I don't know if that's what's going to happen. So, and I believe they had said shows, plural, so there's going to be some other show, and I've heard, certain people saying there's another show of some sort that's not been revealed yet. I don't know at all what that could possibly be. It's not going to be Bill and Ted, or where it could possibly be, although they do have the Animal Actors stage, and if they might put up something in the middle of the park after all, but I don't know. Again, it's the mystery, it's the suspense, it's something for us to speculate and have fun with. Oh, the suspense is terrible. I hope it lasts, which is Willy Wonka quoting Oscar Wilde, of course. It's important to be earnest after all. Now let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, so that's what was announced as far as the event. We have 10 houses, 3 scare zones have now been announced, and 1 show. Very exciting update. And a theme for the whole event, something to do with that wonderful decade of the 1980s, when I grew to manhood. So it's an important decade for me. So that's very exciting. But there's some other stuff that was new on the website Thursday too, like all the information about those Rush of Fear and Frequent Fear tickets, which if you're local and you're going to go more than once, you might want to look into, including Ultimate Frequent Fear, which is a bit pricey, or as they say in Oregon, I'm sure that Shelby would agree with me, spendy is the term they use there. I've heard my relatives who live in Portland use that occasionally. Spendy, yes. A bit spendy if you want the Ultimate Frequent Fear Pass with Express, which would guarantee that you could go every single night of the event, all 34 nights, and be able to use Express 1 time each on all 10 haunted houses every night. But you have to be able to afford a ticket that's $599.99, or in other words, $600. But they just don't want to say $600. They say $599.99 because people might psychologically, I wouldn't spend $600 on a ticket. Oh, but $599.99? Oh, sure, I'll spend that. It's just one penny, you ding-dong. But they would. That's why all those TV advertisements are only $19.99, because they know you might not spend $20, but anything, even a cent less, you might go ahead and buy it. It's psychological. All right, so that's what we now know about the event. All kinds of new, exciting information came out one go on Thursday morning. Isn't that exciting? And people are just thrilled about Vamp 85, yeah. And, oh, I would have liked Vamp 77, though, or something, and have, like, disco music. But maybe someday they'll do that. But I'd always wanted, sequels to Vamp 55 in later decades. I wanted Vamp 69, dude. That would have been awesome, like Woodstock. That would have been funny. Maybe in the future they'll jump around with more vampire scare zones in other time periods. Vampires and grunge bands in the 90s. But no, this is the 80s for vampires. So, here we go. And of course, 7 remaining haunted houses, 2 remaining scare zones, and maybe another show remain to be revealed in the future. Oh, speaking of going back to the future, isn't it funny that Vamp 55 and Vamp 85 take place in the years from Back to the Future? Because Marty McFly was in 1985 and went in his DeLorean back to 1955, in October, by the way. You ever notice in the movie that it's around Halloween time? So that's quite amusing to me, because it's like the joke I made a couple years ago, and I'm going to make it again. Drac to the future. Does that mean we'll get a Scare Zone set in 2015? An alternate 2015 with flying cars? Oh dear. I don't know. So then, that concludes this video where I wrap up all the stuff that was revealed earlier this week, and hopefully in the near future I can continue my history videos. I keep saying that, but I don't produce them, sorry, and continue with the 12th part of my history of Halloween Horror Nights 25, where I will finally start talking about the 4th and worst Walking Dead house of all time, which might be why I'm so I've been dragging my feet on that one. And that's the one with the wet zombies. Oh, they were so we have zombies underwater. No, they're just sort of standing around in a wading pool looking really miserable and damp and unhappy and uncomfortable and smelling bad. Poor guys. No, that's coming up. And of course, when there's another amazing revelation about Horror Nights, whether it's in Orlando or Hollywood or Singapore or Japan, I'll make another one of these. And of course now I've got to make 3 cocktail videos for those scare zones. Except, of course, the descriptions are not very precise. What exactly will be in the zone, you know, we can get a sort of idea, but is it, you know, when we get to the event and see it, oh, that's what that meant. That happens a lot with scare zones. And so I don't really want to, maybe I'll wait a bit before I make the zone. Maybe I'll finish all the house cocktails and get to the zone cocktails closer or during the event, because I'll know exactly what the zones are by then. Or ponder a bit more. At any rate, I've got no idea what the cocktails are going to be yet, or what ingredients I will use yet, and so I can't make them just yet. So it'll be a while before you see those videos. So that's it, and it's now getting close to 40 minutes, so I better shut the fuck up and return you to your lovely Saturday, because there's lots of fun happening this afternoon. If you're a sports fan, you've already seen the tennis championship, the ladies championship, and Roland Garros, if you watch that. And then there's a wonderful horse race. The 3rd gem of the Triple Crown is today, the Belmont Stakes. And maybe that horse will win and get the crown this year. And then, of course, there's an MLS football match between Orlando City Soccer Club, my Lions, will be going up against the Vancouver Whitecaps. So lots of stuff going on. Tomorrow night's the Tony Awards. That's exciting too. But enough of all. Who's going to win? SpongeBob SquarePants? Harry Potter and the Cursed Child? Mean Girls? Angels in America? We don't know yet. Oh yes. So all of that's exciting, waiting to be seen, because I'm going off on a tangent of stream of consciousness, and that may be why I don't get a press pass for my vlog like other people who have vlogs. They get the press passes and get to go to the media party. And no, even though I've been making videos for all these years and people seem to like the damn things, maybe if I had proper lighting and shaved once in a while, edited these and took out all the random shit, maybe then I'd like to, you know, if anyone from Universal is watching this, I'd really like to be a part of that, because I sell your event as hard as I can in all these videos, and after all, hey, I know there's an open bar at the HHN press party. You know, and you know I do like a good cocktail. All right, enough of that silliness. So this is it. Catch you later. Have a good time, and we'll see you at Horror Nights when we all go back to the past and enjoy the 1980s one more time for some of us and the first time for you little kiddies. Ta-ta!